As the sun dipped below the horizon, a peculiar calm settled over Jerusalem. The bustling city was alive with whispers of prophecy and judgment, yet my heart bore a weight that no one else could comprehend. Every step I took toward the garden felt like walking deeper into a preordained storm. My companions sensed something, though they couldn't grasp its magnitude. I carried the knowledge of what was to come, a burden only I could bear. Why did I choose to walk this path? Could I not have avoided the pain, the betrayal, the ultimate sacrifice? The answer lies in the love that binds creation together, a love so vast that it cannot turn away from suffering, but instead confronts it head-on. It was not the nails, the whips, or the thorns that kept me moving forward. It was the knowledge that this moment, as harrowing as it would be, was the culmination of the greatest act of love the world would ever witness. The garden was eerily still, yet my soul churned with the anguish of the hours ahead. I knelt in the soft earth, the olive trees standing like silent witnesses to my torment. The weight of humanity's pain pressed upon me, a heaviness that no mortal could bear. As I prayed, sweat mingled with drops of blood that fell to the ground. This was no ordinary prayer, but a dialogue with the Father, one last communion before the storm unleashed its fury. "Father, if it is possible, let this cup pass from me," I pleaded, knowing full well the answer. Even in the anguish, there was surrender. "Yet not my will, but yours be done." In that moment, divine resolve overcame human frailty. I arose, the weight still heavy, but my spirit steeled for what was to come. Before we go further into this powerful moment, take a moment to consider, how often do we truly reflect on the depth of Christ's sacrifice? If you're as inspired by these stories as we are, be sure to subscribe to our channel. Together, we can continue sharing the life and teachings of Jesus with the world. The silence of the night shattered with the sound of approaching footsteps. A familiar figure led the mob, his face illuminated by the torches they carried. Judas. The sting of his betrayal pierced deeper than any wound I would later endure. "Friend," I addressed him, my voice steady yet laced with sorrow. "Do what you came for." The soldiers seized me, their hands rough and their demeanor cold. My disciples, confused and frightened, scattered into the shadows. The weight of abandonment added to the burden I already carried. Yet even in this, I held no bitterness. Love does not falter in the face of betrayal. It endures. Bound and surrounded by armed guards, I was led through the narrow, dimly lit streets of Jerusalem. The air was thick with tension, whispers carried by the wind as if the city itself knew the weight of what was unfolding. My feet brushed against the uneven stones, the night's chill biting into my skin. Yet, it wasn't the cold or the ropes cutting into my wrists that held my attention. It was the faces of those around me. Some bore curiosity, others hatred, and a few silent grief. The first stop was the house of Annas, the former high priest, a man whose influence still lingered like a shadow over the religious leaders. He questioned me with a cunning tone, seeking to entangle me in my own words. His eyes were sharp, but his questions revealed his fear. "By what authority do you teach? What is this doctrine you spread?" I met his gaze, calm and unyielding. "I've spoken openly to the world," I replied. "I taught in synagogues and in the temple, where all the Jews come together. I said nothing in secret. Why question me? Ask those who heard me." At my words, one of the guards struck me across the face. The sharp sting resonated, but my resolve remained unbroken. "If I spoke wrongly," I said, turning to him, "testify to the wrong. But if I spoke the truth, why do you strike me?" From Annas, I was sent to Caiaphas, the current high priest. His court was assembled, elders, scribes, and chief priests, their robes flowing as they convened under the cover of darkness. They sought witnesses, their words twisted into accusations. One claimed I had spoken of destroying the temple, but their testimonies did not align. The frustration in their faces was evident. Finally, Caiaphas himself stood, his voice filled with accusation. "Are you the Messiah, the Son of the Blessed One?" The question hung in the air, every eye in the room fixed on me. This was the moment they had been waiting for, the admission they would use against me. I held their gaze and answered, "I am. And you will see the Son of Man seated at the right hand of power and coming with the clouds of heaven." Gasps filled the room, followed by an uproar. Caiaphas tore his robes, his voice echoing with condemnation. "Blasphemy!" he cried. "What further witnesses do we need? You have heard it yourselves." The verdict was sealed in their hearts before I ever spoke. The guards spat on me, blindfolded me, and struck me, mocking, "Prophecy! Who struck you?" Each blow reminded me not of their hatred, but of the love that drove me to endure. As the night deepened, I was left in the hands of men whose hearts were hardened, but my spirit remained steadfast. The path before me was dark, yet I knew it would lead to the dawn of redemption. At dawn, they led me to the Roman governor, Pontius Pilate. The morning sun cast its light over the city, but within the walls of the praetorium a storm brewed. Pilate stood before me, his expression unreadable. He was a man torn between political survival and the faintest whispers of truth he struggled to grasp. The religious leaders wasted no time, presenting their accusations. "This man claims to be a king," they cried. "He stirs up the people and opposes Caesar." Their words dripped with venom, yet their eyes betrayed their true intent. They sought my death, not justice. Pilate turned to me, his voice low but firm. "Are you the king of the Jews?" I met his gaze, calm despite the mounting tension. "You say so," I replied, my words holding a deeper meaning than he could comprehend. Pilate seemed unsettled, sensing that this trial was unlike any he had presided over. He stepped back to address the crowd. "I find no basis for a charge against this man," he declared. But the leaders persisted, their shouts growing louder. Pilate's unease deepened as he sought an escape. When he learned I was from Galilee, he saw an opportunity and sent me to Herod, the ruler of that region, who was in Jerusalem at the time. Herod, eager to see me, welcomed my arrival with curiosity. He had heard of my teachings and miracles and hoped to witness some display of power. Yet, as he questioned me, I remained silent. His impatience turned to mockery, and his court followed his lead. They dressed me in an elegant robe, a cruel attempt to mimic the majesty they refused to acknowledge. With laughter and insults, they sent me back to Pilate, their scorn a prelude to what awaited. Once more, I stood before Pilate, the crowd now a sea of chaos. Pilate's voice faltered as he addressed them. "I have examined him and found no guilt deserving of death. Neither has Herod. I will punish him and release him." The crowd roared in protest, their cries echoing through the praetorium. "Crucify him!" they shouted, their voices merging into a single deafening demand. Pilate, desperate to maintain order, offered them a choice, me or Barabbas, a known rebel and murderer. The decision was meant to be obvious, yet the crowd, urged by the leaders, chose Barabbas. Pilate's shoulders sagged under the weight of the moment. He washed his hands before the crowd, a futile gesture of absolution. "I am innocent of this man's blood," he said. Yet, the decision was made and the sentence was clear. As I stood there, gazing at the faces of the crowd, I felt no anger, no hatred. Each cry, each insult, was a reminder of why I was there. The weight of their sins, their fears, their brokenness, they were why I walked this path. even in their rejection, I saw the depth of love that held me steadfast. The sentence was declared. The crowd's chants of "Crucify him" echoed in my ears as the soldiers dragged me away. Their hands were rough, their mockery relentless. I was taken into the governor's headquarters, where the entire company of soldiers gathered around me, eager to partake in their cruel entertainment. They stripped me of my clothing and draped a scarlet robe across my shoulders. One of them twisted thorny branches into a crude crown and pressed it onto my head. The sharp thorns pierced my scalp, and warm blood trickled down my face. They handed me a reed, mockingly proclaiming, "Hail, King of the Jews!" Their laughter filled the room as they knelt before me in exaggerated gestures of mock reverence. Then, with no restraint, they struck me on the head with the reed, driving the thorns deeper. Spit landed on my face, mingling with the blood and sweat. Their hatred was loud, but I remained silent. Every insult, every blow, reminded me of the burden I bore, not of condemnation, but of love. They could not comprehend that the man they mocked was willingly enduring this for them. After their mockery, they led me out to be crucified. They placed a rough wooden cross on my shoulders, its weight pressing into the open wounds on my back. Each step was agonizing. The cobblestone streets of Jerusalem seemed endless as I stumbled forward, the crowd jeering and spitting. Some faces reflected pity, others contempt. A few wept, their sorrow almost unbearable to witness. My strength waned under the burden of the cross, and I fell to the ground. The soldiers, impatient and uncaring, seized a man from the crowd, a visitor named Simon of Cyrene. They forced him to carry the cross behind me, his reluctance evident. Yet, even in his hesitation, there was kindness in his gaze. I could see the seeds of transformation being planted within him. As we neared the place called Golgotha, the place of the skull, the crowd's noise grew louder. Women lined the path, wailing in lamentation. Turning to them, I spoke through the pain. "Daughters of Jerusalem, do not weep for me. Weep for yourselves and for your children. For the days are coming when they will say, 'Blessed are the barren, the wombs that never bore, and the breasts that never nursed.'" The soldiers hurried us along, their impatience evident. They cared little for my words, focused only on their task. The weight of humanity's sin pressed upon me more than the wood on my shoulders, but I walked forward willingly. Every step toward Golgotha brought me closer to fulfilling what I had come to do. Each moment of suffering was a testament to the depth of a love that surpasses understanding. As the hill came into view, I knew the final stage of this journey was at hand. The crowd's jeers continued, but in their eyes, I saw the very souls I sought to save. As we reached Golgotha, the hill loomed stark against the sky, its rocky surface a stage for the agony that awaited. The soldiers wasted no time. They stripped me of the robe they had mocked me with, reopening the wounds on my back as the fabric tore away. The air stung my bare skin, and the world seemed to hold its breath as they prepared the cross. The rough wood lay on the ground, its surface coarse and splintered. They forced me down upon it, stretching out my arms to align with the beams. The first nail was driven into my wrist, and a searing pain shot through my entire body. The sound of the hammer striking metal echoed in the air, each blow a reminder of the weight I bore for humanity. My body convulsed with the agony, yet I uttered no curse, no word of condemnation. Instead, my heart remained fixed on the purpose that brought me here. The second nail followed, securing my other hand to the crossbeam. My feet were then placed together and nailed to the upright beam, completing the excruciating process. Each strike of the hammer reverberated through the earth and into the heavens, a declaration of the love that endured even the deepest suffering. The soldiers hoisted the cross upright, and as it dropped into its place, the impact jolted my entire body. The weight of my own form pulled against the nails, intensifying the pain with every breath. The sky above was clear, but within me, the storm raged. The physical agony was immense, but the weight of the world's sin was even greater, pressing down on my soul. The crowd gathered below, their voices a mixture of mockery and curiosity. "You, who would destroy the temple and rebuild it in 3 days, save yourself," they jeered. "If you are the Son of God, come down from the cross." The chief priests and elders joined in, their scorn cutting deeper than their words. "He saved others, but he cannot save himself. Let him come down now, and we will believe in him." Even amidst the mockery, I spoke words of mercy. My gaze fell upon those who nailed me to this tree, men carrying out their orders without understanding the magnitude of what they did. "Father, forgive them," I prayed, "for they know not what they do." 2 men hung beside me, criminals condemned for their own deeds. One joined the crowd in his insults, demanding that I save myself and them. The other, however, turned to me with desperation in his eyes. "Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom." Through the haze of pain, I assured him, "Truly, I tell you today, you will be with me in paradise." In his brokenness, he saw what others could not, the truth of who I was. Suspended between heaven and earth, the cross became the bridge. Every breath, every word, carried the weight of redemption, and the world held its breath as the greatest act of love unfolded. Time seemed to stretch endlessly as I hung there, suspended between heaven and earth. The sun, once shining brightly, began to dim. An unnatural darkness crept across the land, blanketing Golgotha in an eerie shadow. The onlookers shifted uneasily, their mockery subdued by the ominous change in the atmosphere. Even those who had scorned me moments earlier now whispered in hushed tones, sensing that something beyond their understanding was unfolding. The pain in my body was relentless, each breath a struggle as I pushed against the nails to lift myself and fill my lungs. The weight of the world's sin pressed upon me, heavier than the cross itself. It wasn't just the physical agony. It was the spiritual torment of bearing humanity's guilt, shame, and brokenness. Every betrayal, every act of violence, every sin, past, present, and future, was laid upon me. My soul groaned under the unbearable weight. In the midst of the darkness, my gaze fell upon a small group of familiar faces. My mother stood there, her anguish etched deeply into her expression. Beside her was John, the disciple I loved dearly. Seeing her pain was a piercing sorrow, far deeper than any physical wound. With a voice strained but full of love, I addressed her, "Woman, behold your son." Then looking to John, I said, "Behold your mother." Even in my suffering, I sought to ensure that she would not be alone. The hours dragged on, the darkness thickening like a shroud over the earth. The silence was broken only by the occasional cry from those crucified beside me, or the murmurs of the crowd below. Each moment felt like an eternity as the weight of sin and separation grew more intense. My connection with the Father, so intimate and unbroken, began to feel distant. The crushing realization of abandonment pierced my spirit. My God, why have you forsaken me?" I cried out, the words echoing into the oppressive stillness. The crowd below misunderstood my lament, some thinking I was calling for Elijah to come to my aid. They mocked again, offering me sour wine on a sponge, but their jeers felt hollow against the gravity of what was happening. The earth itself seemed to groan under the weight of the moment. The rocks trembled, and the wind howled as if creation itself mourned. The heavens bore witness to the greatest act of love, and yet it was cloaked in anguish. I could feel my strength fading, my body succumbing to the torment. But amidst the darkness, there was clarity. I knew the purpose of this suffering and the victory it would achieve. The pain, the abandonment, the ridicule, all of it was part of the plan to redeem humanity. As the final moments approached, the darkness served as a reminder of what was at stake, the light that would soon pierce the grave and offer hope to a broken world. The darkness deepened, and the air grew heavier, as if the weight of creation bore down on this hill. My body trembled, racked with pain that defied words. Every nerve screamed, every muscle strained against the agony. But it was the silence from heaven that pierced deepest, a silence that spoke of the Father's separation, necessary to bear the full penalty of humanity's sin. In that moment, I stood utterly alone, carrying the sin of the world. The crowd had quieted, their earlier jeers now subdued. Even the most hardened faces reflected unease, as though they sensed something far greater than an execution was taking place. Some clung to their mockery out of fear, their laughter hollow. Others gazed with growing understanding, their hearts beginning to break under the weight of what they were witnessing. With each passing moment, my life ebbed away. My breathing was shallow, each inhale a battle against the agony radiating through my body. The sky, shrouded in unnatural darkness, seemed to press down on all of us. Creation itself groaned under the strain of the divine sacrifice unfolding before it. As the hour drew near, I uttered words that carried the fullness of my mission. "I thirst," I said, my parched lips barely able to form the words. A soldier lifted a sponge soaked in sour wine to my mouth. The bitterness of it stung, yet it served as a reminder of the cup I had chosen to drink, the cup of suffering and redemption. The ground beneath us trembled as the final moments approached. My spirit, though battered, remained steadfast. I looked out over the crowd, the faces of those who had condemned me, mocked me, and deserted me. Even in their rejection, my heart held nothing but love. Every drop of blood, every moment of suffering was for them, for their restoration, for their redemption. With my final breaths, I lifted my voice, declaring a cry that would echo through eternity. "It is finished." These words carried the weight of triumph. The plan of redemption, woven since the foundation of the world, was now complete. Sin and death no longer held dominion. The price had been paid in full. The ground shook violently, and the rocks split open. The veil in the temple, that sacred curtain separating humanity from the presence of God, was torn from top to bottom. The barrier was gone. Access to the Father was now made possible, not through rituals or sacrifices, but through the love that hung on this cross. I felt my life slipping away, the last of my strength leaving me. With one final act of surrender, I prayed, "Father, into your hands I commit my spirit." My head fell forward, and the world seemed to exhale as the weight of sin was lifted. The moment was both an end and a beginning. My death was not defeat, but victory, a victory that would resound through heaven and earth, offering hope to all who would believe. When I breathed my last, the earth seemed to cry out in grief. The ground shook violently, splitting rocks and unsettling even the most unshakable hearts. The temple veil, that sacred barrier separating the Holy of Holies, was torn in two from top to bottom. It was a moment of profound significance, though few understood its meaning then. The old order had been overturned. The separation between God and humanity was no more. My sacrifice bridged the divide. The soldiers, hardened men accustomed to death, stood frozen in the aftermath. One of them, a centurion who had overseen many crucifixions, gazed at me with a mix of awe and fear. "Surely this man was the Son of God?" he declared, his voice trembling. His words echoed the truth that had been displayed for all to see. My death was no ordinary death, and this was no ordinary day. The crowd that had gathered to mock me began to disperse, their jeers replaced by uneasy silence. Many beat their chests in anguish, overcome by a sorrow they could not explain. Others hurried away, their faces pale with fear, as if they had witnessed a cosmic event beyond their comprehension. Among them were my followers, silent and grief-stricken, struggling to reconcile the sight of their Messiah hanging lifeless on a cross. As my body hung there, lifeless and battered, two men stepped forward with courage amidst the chaos. Joseph of Arimathea, a wealthy man and secret disciple, sought permission from Pilate to take my body down. Nicodemus, who had once come to me under the cover of night, brought spices to prepare me for burial. Together, they wrapped my body in linen and placed it in a new tomb carved from rock. It was a quiet act of devotion, their faith evident even in their sorrow. The tomb was sealed with a massive stone, and Roman guards were stationed to ensure no one tampered with it. The religious leaders, still blinded by their fear and pride, sought to prevent any possibility of what they called deceit. They did not realize that no stone, no seal, no guard could contain the power of what was to come. Inside the tomb, silence reigned, but the story was far from over. My death had fulfilled the purpose for which I came, to offer myself as the atoning sacrifice for sin. But death would not hold me. The grave could not claim victory. The world would soon witness the ultimate triumph, a victory over death itself, as I would rise again on the third day. The journey to the cross was complete, but its impact would ripple through time and eternity. My sacrifice was for all, for the doubters, the mockers, the broken, and the lost. For you. The cross was not the end, but the beginning of a new covenant, a promise of redemption and eternal life for all who believe. Thank you for walking with us through this extraordinary story of love and redemption. If this message touched your heart, help us reach 1,000 subscribers so we can share the story of Christ with even more people around the world. Your support means so much. Subscribe, share this video, and let's bring the light of His message to those who need it most.